They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. I never truly understood that until the night I found out my wife and my sister were sleeping together. My name is Ethan Carter, and I used to believe I had the perfect life. A good job as a financial analyst, a comfortable home in the suburbs, and a wife I adored, Hannah. We'd been married for 6 years, and while things weren't as electric as they were in the beginning, I thought we were solid, stable, safe. My sister, Olivia, had always been my best friend growing up. She was 2 years younger than me, rebellious where I was responsible, wild where I was measured. We had each other's backs through everything. Our parents' ugly divorce, her questionable relationships, my career struggles. Even when we both became adults with separate lives, we remained close. Or at least, I thought we did. I found out the truth on a rainy Tuesday evening. I came home from work late, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, expecting nothing more than a quiet dinner and maybe a glass of wine. Instead, I walked into a half-lit house, the scent of Hannah's vanilla perfume lingering in the air. Something felt off. I called out for her. No answer. Then, from upstairs, the faintest sound, a whisper, a giggle, followed by the unmistakable creak of our bed frame. My heart stopped. I moved on autopilot, my legs carrying me up the stairs, without my permission. With each step, my mind desperately tried to rationalize what I already knew in my gut. Maybe she was watching a video. Maybe she had a friend over. Maybe. But then I heard her voice, breathy, playful. Olivia, Ethan's going to be home soon. And my sister's voice, low and teasing. Then we better be quick. My body went ice cold. I stood outside the half-open bedroom door, staring at the pile of discarded clothes on the floor, my wife's dress, my sister's blouse. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, so hard I thought they'd draw blood. I should have barged in. I should have screamed, demanded an explanation, made them see me standing there, shattered. But I couldn't. I turned around, walked out of the house, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. For hours, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind played a relentless loop of memories. Olivia laughing with Hannah over brunch. The way Hannah always defended Olivia's reckless behavior. The nights Hannah claimed she was visiting her mom. But somehow Olivia always knew about those plans before I did. I wanted to be sick. By the time I returned home, it was past midnight. The house was dark, silent, as if it hadn't just been the scene of my wife and sister's betrayal. Hannah was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed as if nothing had happened. I stood there in the doorway, watching her. For a brief moment, I considered pretending I didn't know, pretending it was just a bad dream. But the rage inside me was louder than the fear of confrontation. They weren't getting away with this. The annual family dinner was in 4 days, a Carter family tradition. Everyone would be there. My mom, my dad, Olivia, our cousins, aunts, uncles. Hannah had always been the perfect daughter-in-law in their eyes. Olivia, the charming but reckless little sister. I was going to expose them, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. I spent the next 4 days living in a world that no longer felt real. I went through the motions, waking up, going to work, sharing meals with Hannah. But every moment felt like a performance. They had no idea I knew. And that was the only thing keeping me sane. Hannah still kissed me goodnight, still rested her head on my shoulder while we watched TV. I wondered if she ever thought about Olivia while she lay next to me. And Olivia, God, Olivia. She texted me like she always did, sending me memes, asking about my day. Looking forward to dinner this weekend. Mom's been talking about it nonstop. She wrote the night before. I stared at the message for a long time before typing my response. Me too. Can't wait to see everyone. I could almost hear the satisfaction in my own lie. The plan formed in my head like a slow-burning fuse. I wanted everyone to hear the truth at the same time. No whispers, no damage control, no escape. Just pure, public exposure. The family dinner was always hosted at my mother's house. It was a formal affair. Tables set with our grandmother's china, candles flickering in antique holders, wine poured into crystal glasses. My mother loved order. She prided herself on our family's reputation, on the illusion of togetherness. That illusion was about to shatter. I drove Hannah and myself to my mother's house, pretending everything was normal. She wore a dark green dress, her hair pinned back, gold earrings catching the light as she adjusted them in the mirror. "You look beautiful," I told her. She smiled, reaching for my hand. "You're sweet." I wondered if she'd touched Olivia the same way. The moment we arrived, Olivia was the first to greet us. She hugged me, held on for a second too long. I forced myself to hug her back, trying to ignore the phantom sensation of her body entangled with my wife's. The dining room was alive with conversation, silverware clinking against plates as wine flowed freely. My mother fussed over the roast, my father droned on about his golf game, cousins debated politics. It was an evening like any other. And then it was time. I waited until dessert was being served, when the mood was light, when no one expected what was coming. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady when I finally spoke. "I have an announcement." The table fell silent. Every eye turned to me. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass, savoring the tension. This was it. I looked straight at Olivia first, then at Hannah. Their smiles wavered. "I found out recently that my wife is having an affair," I said, my voice smooth, almost casual. "With my sister." The reaction was immediate. Someone choked on their drink. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. Gasps rippled through the room. Hannah's face went pale, her eyes wide with terror. Olivia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My father, usually a man of few words, slammed his fist on the table. "What the hell are you talking about?" I turned to him, as calmly as if I were discussing the weather. "Exactly what I said. Hannah and Olivia have been sneaking around behind my back." I gestured toward them with my glass. I walked in on them. My mother looked at Olivia, voice trembling. "Tell me this isn't true." Olivia's face was red now, her breathing shallow. "Ethan, can we talk about this privately?" I laughed. "Oh, now you want privacy. Didn't seem like you cared about that when you were sleeping with my wife." Hannah reached for my arm, voice desperate. "Ethan, please." "Don't touch me," I snapped, jerking away. Disgust rolled through me. Silence stretched across the table, thick and suffocating. Golden. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted. Then, Olivia made the mistake of trying to play the victim. "It's not like that," she stammered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I interrupted coldly. "And the worst part? I trusted you. I loved you as my sister. I told you everything about my marriage. And the whole time, you were betraying me." My mother covered her mouth with her hands, horror in her eyes. "Olivia, how could you?" Hannah started crying, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. "Ethan, I love you." "No," I cut her off. I refused to let her rewrite the narrative. "You love sneaking around. You love lying. But you don't love me." No one spoke. I exhaled slowly, then pushed my chair back and stood. "Well," I said, smoothing my shirt. "That's all I had to say." Then I walked out, leaving them to choke on their shame. I walked out of my mother's house without looking back. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. The bomb had exploded, and I could still hear the echoes of my family's shock reverberating through the dining room. The night air was crisp against my burning skin as I reached my car, hands trembling as I pulled out my keys. I wasn't sure if it was adrenaline, rage, or the sheer weight of what I had just done. It had been perfect. That moment of silence, the way Olivia's face twisted in horror, the way Hannah's breath hitched when I dropped the truth, like a grenade into the middle of our perfect little dinner. I had imagined the moment 100 different ways, but reality had surpassed my wildest expectations. I had owned the room, and now they had to live with the truth. As I gripped the steering wheel, my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Olivia." I let it ring. Then another call. Hannah this time. Then my mother. I smirked, watching as the screen lit up with their names one after the other. They were scrambling now. Panicking. Good. I started the engine and drove, the city lights blurring as my mind raced through everything that had just happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the fallout. I had spent the past 4 days waiting for this moment, but now that it was done, I realized I had no idea what came next. Where did I go from here? I pulled into a parking lot near a late-night diner, the neon sign buzzing in the darkness. I wasn't hungry, but I needed somewhere to think. Somewhere away from my mother's house, away from Hannah's lies and Olivia's guilt. Sliding into a booth by the window, I stared at the untouched menu in front of me. Everything still felt unreal. "Rough night?" a waitress asked, pouring me a cup of coffee before I could even respond. I let out a dry laugh. "You have no idea." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press, just left me alone with my thoughts. Then my phone buzzed again. This time a text. From Olivia. "Ethan, please. We need to talk. Just you and me. I'll tell you everything. Please." I tapped my fingers against the table, considering. A part of me wanted to block her, shut her out completely. But another part of me, the part that still wanted answers, needed to hear her admit it to my face. So I typed back. "One chance. Meet me at the park in an hour." The park was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few streetlights casting dim pools of light onto the pavement. Olivia was already there, sitting on a bench, arms wrapped around herself, like a child bracing for punishment. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "Ethan, I don't want excuses," I said coldly, cutting her off. "Just answers." Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed, the sound hollow. "Yeah, and yet it did. Over and over again." She flinched but didn't look away. "I never meant to hurt you." "You keep saying that like it makes a difference," I snapped. "Did you think of me at all? Did you ever feel even a little guilty while sneaking around with my wife?" She swallowed hard, tears now streaming down her face. "I did. Every single time. But She hesitated, her voice breaking. "I fell in love with her." My stomach twisted, even though I had suspected it. Hearing it out loud made something inside me crack. I clenched my jaw. "You're unbelievable." "Ethan, No, I shook my head. "You don't get to say my name like we're still family. You destroyed that." Olivia covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I didn't care. I hope she was worth it," I said, voice like ice. Then I turned and walked away. Again. Walked away from Olivia without looking back. Again. The echoes of her sobs faded behind me as I reached my car, my hands tightening around the steering wheel, as if gripping something solid could keep me from unraveling. She fell in love with her. The words kept ringing in my head, each repetition like a fresh wound being carved into my chest. I should have been done with this. I had my revenge. I had humiliated them both, burned the bridge, and left them choking on the ashes. So why did I still feel like I was drowning? As I drove home, I checked my phone. Another barrage of missed calls and texts. My mother, my father, even my cousins were texting me, asking if what I said at dinner was a joke. And Hannah, she had sent exactly one message. "We need to talk." I let out a bitter laugh. Talk? Now she wanted to talk. After months of sneaking around? After ruining everything? I ignored the message. By the time I pulled into my driveway, exhaustion was pressing down on me like a weight. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew I wouldn't be getting any rest tonight. Hannah was sitting on the couch, still wearing her dress from dinner, her eyes red and swollen. She had been crying. Good. She looked up at me, swallowing hard. "Ethan." No, my voice was flat, emotionless. I wasn't interested in whatever pathetic excuse she had rehearsed in her head. She flinched. "Please, just listen." I dropped my keys onto the counter with a clatter. "Why? So you can tell me how it didn't mean anything? That it was just a mistake?" Her hands clenched into fists. "No," she whispered, "because it wasn't." I froze. Of all the things she could have said, that was the one I wasn't prepared for. Hannah stood, wiping her tear-streaked face. "I didn't cheat on you because I was bored, Ethan, or because I wanted to hurt you. I cheated because I fell in love with her." A hollow, ugly laugh escaped me. "Wow, you and Olivia really coordinated your stories, huh?" She bit her lip, her hands shaking. "I never meant for it to happen." "You never meant for it to happen," I repeated mockingly. "Yeah, I heard that one already. Funny how it just happened multiple times, in our bed, behind my back." Hannah squeezed her eyes shut. "I know you hate me. I know I deserve it, but I swear to you, I tried to fight it. I snapped. Fight it. I barked, my voice rising. Oh, you tried? What, was it an addiction? Did you wake up every morning and tell yourself, I'll try not to sleep with my husband's sister today? She burst into tears. I loved you, Ethan. I still love you. But not enough. I finished for her. Silence. The final nail in the coffin. She looked at me, broken, pleading, but I felt nothing except the burning need to get out of this house. I turned on my heel and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? She called after me. I didn't even bother to turn around. Packing my bags. By the time morning came, I had barely slept. My suitcase was packed, sitting by the door like a symbol of the end of everything. I had no solid plan, no clear direction, just the overwhelming need to get out. Hannah was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, clutching a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I grabbed my suitcase, pulled out my phone, and tapped on the Uber app. I had no intention of driving anywhere. Just as I stepped outside, a car pulled into the driveway. I frowned. I hadn't called a car yet. Then the driver's door opened, and my mother stepped out. Shit. She looked at me, then at my suitcase, her lips pressing into a thin line. Going somewhere? I sighed. Mom, not now. She shut the car door and marched up to me, eyes sharp and furious. Oh, now you don't want to talk. You had plenty to say at dinner. I clenched my jaw. I said what needed to be said. She crossed her arms. And you think walking away is the answer? I exhaled through my nose. I'm not having this conversation. But she wasn't backing down. So that's it. You're just going to leave? What happened to fighting for your marriage? I laughed bitterly. You want me to fight for this? I gestured toward the house, where my wife had slept with my sister. Tell me, Mom, is that what you do? She hesitated, but I saw the flicker of shame in her eyes. She knew I was right. Then, to my absolute horror, she turned toward the house and said, Hannah, come outside. I swore under my breath. Of course, she was going to force a conversation. Hannah stepped out hesitantly, arms wrapped around herself. Mom looked between the two of us. Sit, both of you. I don't want to sit. I don't care. She wasn't leaving until we did. I reluctantly sat on the porch steps, Hannah perching a few feet away from me. Mom paced in front of us. This is a mess, she said bluntly. But you two need to decide what happens next. And you're not doing it by running away. I exhaled sharply. Mom, it's over. She was sleeping with Olivia. That's not something you come back from. Mom looked at Hannah. Do you love him? Tears welled up in her eyes. Yes. I scoffed. Bullshit. Mom turned back to me. And you still love her? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Love didn't just vanish overnight. Even after everything, there was a tiny, infuriating part of me that still felt something when I looked at Hannah. But love wasn't enough. I stood abruptly. I have nothing else to say. Mom reached for my arm. Ethan. I gently pulled away. I need to go. Hannah looked up at me, eyes pleading. Please. But I just shook my head. Goodbye, Hannah. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the Uber that had just arrived. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was never coming back. I didn't look back as the Uber pulled away from the house. Hannah was standing on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, her lips slightly parted as if she wanted to call out to me. But she didn't, and I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Airport or hotel? I hesitated. I had no plan, no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house another second. Hotel, I muttered. Just somewhere decent downtown. The driver nodded and merged onto the main road. I leaned my head against the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. It hit me then. I had no home anymore. My house wasn't mine. My wife wasn't mine. Even my sister wasn't mine. I had been completely erased from my own life. The hotel was decent enough. Neutral beige walls, an overpriced minibar, and the distant hum of city traffic outside my window. I dropped my suitcase, sat on the edge of the bed, and exhaled deeply. For the first time in days, the weight of everything came crashing down. I was alone. I stared at my phone. My mother had texted a few times. My father had finally weighed in with a simple, "Call me." But it was Olivia's name that made my stomach twist. "Ethan, please, I need to explain. I don't expect forgiveness. Just hear me out. You're my brother. I can't lose you like this." I tossed my phone onto the bed. She should have thought about that before sleeping with my wife. For the next few days, I barely left the hotel room. I ate when I remembered to. I slept when exhaustion dragged me under. But mostly, I just existed. Then, on the third night, a knock at the door shattered my isolation. I frowned, pulling myself out of bed. I hadn't ordered anything. When I opened the door, Olivia was standing there. I almost slammed it in her face. She held up her hands. "Ethan, please." I clenched my jaw. "How did you even find me?" "Mom, of course." I sighed, gripping the doorframe. "Go home, Olivia." "No," she said, voice firm. "Not until we talk." Something in me snapped. I stepped aside. "Fine. Say whatever you need to say. And then you leave." She nodded and walked in, hesitating before sitting on the small couch by the window. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Olivia exhaled shakily. "I hate myself for what I did to you." I scoffed. "Not enough to stop." She flinched. "You're right, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand." I folded my arms. "Understand what?" "That you're a selfish coward." She swallowed hard but didn't deny it. "That it wasn't about hurting you. It was about feeling something real." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Oh, that's rich. My marriage was real. My love for Hannah was real. And you tore it apart." Her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I love you. You're my brother. And I know I destroyed that. But if I could take it back, I would." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But some things couldn't be undone. I exhaled sharply. "You should go." She wiped her face and stood. "I'll go. But just know that I'll always be your sister. No matter how much you hate me." I didn't answer. And this time, I was the one who watched her walk away. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. Olivia was gone. My house, my past, my marriage, all of it gone. And somehow, I was still standing. I didn't go back to work right away. I took a leave of absence, citing personal reasons, though my boss already knew. News like this travels fast. Instead, I focused on survival. I found a new apartment, small, quiet, with just enough space to remind me I was starting over. No ghosts of my past lurking in the corners. No shared bed. No stolen moments between my wife and my sister tainting the walls. Just me. And yet, even in my solitude, their absence haunted me. I tried not to think about them, but sometimes I caught myself staring at my phone, expecting a message from Hannah. But she never reached out again. Maybe that was the final betrayal. Even after everything, I was the one who left, and she let me go without a fight. Days turned into weeks. Routine became my anchor. I woke up early, ran in the mornings, worked out until my body ached. I ate at the same diner every night, slowly becoming a familiar face to the staff. I wasn't happy, but I was functioning. And then, one evening, I ran into her. I had stopped by a bookstore after dinner, browsing without any real intention of buying anything. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Ethan." I turned. It was Sophie. Sophie, my ex-girlfriend. The one before Hannah. The one I let go for reasons I no longer remembered. She looked the same. Long dark hair, piercing blue eyes, that sharp wit behind her gaze. I blinked. "Sophie." She smiled, though there was hesitation in it. "It's been a long time." I nodded. "Yeah, it has." She glanced at the book in my hands. Something about rebuilding after betrayal. "Great. Interesting choice," she said, amused. I exhaled. "Yeah, well, life's been complicated." She hesitated, then said softly, "I heard." I stiffened. Of course she had. People love gossip. Sophie tilted her head. "You want to grab a coffee?" I hesitated, but then I realized why not. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." We sat in a quiet cafe. two old flames, pretending we weren't slightly awkward around each other. She stirred her drink absent-mindedly. "So, how are you really?" I smirked. "You want the truth, or the version people expect?" She arched an eyebrow. Ethan Carter was never good at lying. I sighed. "I'm surviving." She nodded, as if she understood something I couldn't even put into words. After a beat, she said, "You know, you never really explained why you ended things with me." I looked down at my coffee. I was an idiot. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, you were." I chuckled. "You're not supposed to agree." Her expression softened. "Maybe this happened for a reason, Ethan. Maybe you needed to lose everything to find something better." I wasn't sure if I believed that, but looking at her now, I wanted to. Maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't over yet. Sophie, and I kept talking long after our coffee had gone cold. It was strange, comforting even, to sit across from someone who had no part in the disaster my life had become. She wasn't tangled in my betrayal, my pain, or my past mistakes. She was just Sophie. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Hannah or Olivia. "So," she said, smirking over her cup, "are you going to pretend this was just a casual run-in, or are you actually going to ask me out?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Are you always this direct?" She shrugged. "Life's short. You, of all people, should know that." I hesitated, the weight of everything I had been carrying pressing down on me. Was I really ready to start something new? But then I looked at her, at the easy way she smiled, at the way she wasn't tiptoeing around me like everyone else had been, and I realized something. I was done being a prisoner to my past. So I took a breath, met her gaze, and said, "Let's find out." The first time I saw Olivia again, it was completely unplanned. It had been a month since the family dinner, the night I had destroyed everything. A month since I had walked away from my marriage, my home, and my sister. And yet, here she was. I had been leaving my apartment building when I saw her sitting on the steps outside, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She stood as soon as she spotted me, her hands gripping the sleeves of her coat. "Ethan." I sighed. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard. I needed to see you." I stared at her, feeling none of the rage I once had, just exhaustion. "I'm not going to forgive you," I said. She nodded. "I know." Silence stretched between us. Then finally she said, "I miss my brother." Something inside me cracked, because despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the wreckage she had left behind, she was still my sister. And maybe, just maybe, some things weren't meant to stay broken forever. 6 months had passed since I walked away from the life I thought was mine. 6 months since the family dinner that shattered everything. I had spent so long drowning in rage, betrayal, and loss. But now, for the first time in forever, I could finally breathe. Life didn't magically fix itself overnight. The wounds were still there, but they had become scars, visible, permanent, but no longer bleeding. I had a new apartment, a new routine, and, most surprisingly, a new relationship. Sophie had become a steady presence in my life, not forcing anything, not rushing me, just being there. And I was grateful for that. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to Hannah again?" I took a sip of my beer, staring at the city lights flickering in the distance. "I don't know." Sophie didn't push. She never did. But later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I already knew the answer. No, Hannah had made her choice. And so had I. Some doors were meant to stay closed. As for Olivia, we weren't what we used to be. But we were something. It had taken time, space, and more silence than I thought possible. But eventually, I found myself texting her back. Small messages. Little moments. We never talked about what happened. But maybe we didn't have to. Maybe in time, we would be okay. Not today, but someday. And that was enough. As I walked home one night after dinner with Sophie, I passed by a bookstore, and out of curiosity, I stepped inside. I didn't know why I went straight to the fiction section, or why my fingers traced along the spines of books until they landed on one I hadn't seen before. A new release, by Julian Grant. I smirked, shaking my head. The man had vanished after the scandal, but here he was, back again. Writers always found a way to tell their stories. For a second, I wondered if he'd written about me. If some version of my life was tucked between those pages, twisted into something dramatic and poetic. Maybe he had, but the truth was, I didn't care anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trapped in someone else's story. I was writing my own, and it was just beginning.